You have relationships with coworkers, you have relationships with children, you have relationships with neighbors, with friends. There's a lot of people, and the reason is because you were hardwired by God for relationship with God, but also relationship with one another as well, right? And so we are the only species on planet Earth that really were created in the image of God. And what that image is he was a speaking being, and you are a speaking being. And communication is the most important thing in our relationships to get along. You're married to a sinner. Did you know that? Yeah, it's quiet up in this house. They're not going to beat you up. Everybody already knows it. We're all people that need help. And so we're going to talk about how to navigate and negotiate conflict in our relationships, I'm going to talk mostly about marriage, but this really applies to every area of your life. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 4 in your notes says that where there are no oxen, the manger is empty, but from the strength of an ox comes abundant harvest. In other words, what he's saying to us is we all want to harvest, right? We all want the tree of a relationship or the tree of a good job or a business to produce for us. We all want that. But it takes hard work, like the ox, to go to work. And that's what we're talking about today, is the work part of this. And you guys have probably never argued with anybody before, right? Come on. Do you remember your first argument? Hopefully you have forgot it. But we all had a first argument. Let me tell you what we found in the archives. We were looking this week for some video of arguments, and we found a video of the very first argument that ever took place on planet Earth. I want you to see this argument.
Adam, does this goat skin make me look big?
Looks better on you than the previous owner. What?
I'm having a hard time losing these last few pounds since bearing your children, and that's the best you can do? I look better than a goat? Thanks.
Babe, you know you are the most beautiful woman on the planet. What?
I'm the only woman on the planet.
Well, I can't help that.
And it's amazing that as the only woman on the planet, you still can't seem to remember my birthday or give me flowers once in a while.
Well, I did give you a rib.
Oh, right. I forgot about that, since you haven't mentioned it for an hour. It's like your free pass to never lift a finger for me again.
Never lift a finger? I am out there busting my rear all day. Food just doesn't pop up from the ground. I have to get it with the sweat of my brow, since someone went and got the ground cursed.
You think farming's hard? Try raising those kids. Try giving birth.
Well, if someone wouldn't have taken advice from a talking reptile.
Oh, here we go.
Are you talking to me, you little snake? What? Oh, jump off a bridge? Oh, I would, but they haven't been invented yet. Oh, eat this fruit? Well, you look like a pretty trustworthy snake.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, well, we were until you went and pretty much ruined it for all of mankind, so good job with that.
I seem to remember you taking a bite, too.
Well, I thought I was eating from the tree of the knowledge of restfulness and serenity.
Right. It's never your fault.
Besides, what was I gonna do with a fallen wife? That would just be weird.
Oh, you fell for me? You're an idiot.
Idiot? I named every single animal.
Right. Great job with that. A prairie dog's not a dog. A seahorse isn't a horse, and a bald eagle isn't bald.
Well, I was going pretty fast.
Aardvark? Platypus?
Okay, they were at the back of the line. Not everything can be cat or rat or bat.
Hippopotamus?
Yeah, well, woman was taken. Okay, how many gourds do you have back there? That was a joke. Not good for men to be alone.
No, it's great.
Aren't arguments uncomfortable? Even watching Adam and Eve was uncomfortable. We're going to learn some things from them today in this message. And I believe that if you'll open your heart, this area of your life. Let me just say this. The most rewarding thing in your life is not more money, it's a better relationship. The payoff of life is found in great relationships. It really is. And by the way, the most destructive and the most painful thing in life. You got it. It's right. It's relationships. They can make life great, or a bad relationship and arguing and fighting can make a life miserable. So today we're going to go to Song of Solomon. Song of Solomon, what a book it is. It's so graphic. You're going to hear from these two today, and the Shulamite woman and Solomon, and you're going to hear how they navigated conflict. This book is so graphic and so real. Sometimes it's uncomfortable because it talked about how they met, their attraction. It talked about their dating process, talked about their honeymoon night, all night long. Talked about their first fight. In fact, the book gives 2 whole chapters to their argument. And then it talks about their restoration and their life together. Today we're going to talk a little bit about this conflict. And I was reading this week in my study, there are the top 5 things that make us argue as husband and wives, and I'm going to give them to you in reverse order. So the 5th one comes first, and that's kids. A lot of the discussion and a lot of the fighting comes over the children, especially if you have a blended family. That makes it even tougher when you have a blended family. Number 4 are the in-laws. Now, if your in-laws are not in the room, you can say amen. But if they're in the room, be quiet. Keep a little peace. The 3rd issue is sexual issues. That is a big one. You can be quiet. Number 2 is finances. And number 1, and this is where we will spend the lion's share of our time today, is number 1 is communication. Did you know that oftentimes we have unmet expectations that we communicate, or lack of communication? We all, because I mentioned earlier, we all are sinners. All of us struggle with this selfish need on the inside. We want what we want, when we want it, and when do we want it? We want it now. We all struggle with a little bit of a selfishness on the inside of us. We use words in communication like you always or you never. And how many of you know those aren't true? Those words are just not true. He did take the trash out one time 3 years ago, but you say he never does. He wants credit for that one time he did. So we always talk about some of the things we should do, shouldn't do. My dad always paid the bills. My dad did this. My mom did that. And sometimes we put that on one another. So we're going to talk about this communication. There's 3 areas of fighting or conflict that we're going to talk about and how to get to the last one. The first one is the actual fight itself. Now, Solomon, he talks about this in this book. This book is an amazing book, although I would hate to experience it as a song. It doesn't sound like too much of a song to me, but he says it was a song. Listen to chapter 5, verse 2. This is her. I'll break this up for you so you know who is speaking, who's not speaking. She says, I slept, but my heart was awakened. Listen, my beloved is knocking. So let me set the stage. Most theologians agree that previous to this verse, the 2 of them had a conflict. It must have been an intense conflict because he gets away from the house for a little bit. He bolts, all right? Let me just say this, ladies, we men are at such a disadvantage when we argue with you because your brains fire faster. You're wittier than we are. You think quicker. You can outword us. You have more words than we do. And what happens to us men is that in the middle of a conflict, we are overwhelmed and we're losing. And what we end up doing, the guys end up doing oftentimes, a guy will pull aside. His heart will flee so that he can process. See, here's the difference between men and women. Women, you guys, ladies, you process through talking it out. Men, we don't want to talk it out. That's trouble in paradise for us. You know how us men process? We process by going and playing golf, going and getting away, going into the man cave. We got to get away so we can think for a minute. Yeah. Did you hear? I never get more amens than I do when I talk about that. Like, it's natural. You think it's, ladies, you think it's just your guy. Or guys, you think it's just your lady that likes to talk. Nope, all ladies process through talking it out. And so what happened here in this situation is Solomon is a dude. He does what dudes do. He bolts in the middle of this argument. Now, listen to what she says. She says, my heart was awakened. Listen, my beloved is knocking. Picture this. If you've ever had a conflict and you guys get ready to go to bed, have you ever noticed you just in the middle of this conflict, you just don't sleep well, do you? I mean, typically, you don't sleep good. You're not sleeping well. Listen to what Solomon did. This thing escalates. I told you it's graphic. Watch what happens. Open to me. He must have come to his senses. He's going to come back home. He's going to repent. He's going to get it right. He's going to sweet talk her. He wants her to open the door. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my flawless one. My head is drenched with dew. He's been outside, obviously. My hair with the dampness of the night. Here's her response. I've taken off my robe. I must put it on again with the question mark. I've washed my feet already. Must I soil them again? Now, let me describe that to you in modern English. She's in bed. He comes back home. He knocks on the door. My sweetie pie, my precious, luscious girl, you're beautiful. Can I come back in? And she's like, hey, big boy, I'm already in bed. I've already got unrobed. I got undressed. You're going to make me get my feet dirty again. I've already taken a bath. How many of you know that wasn't the response big boy was looking for? Watch what he does. My beloved, she says, this is her talking about what he did. My beloved thrust his hand through the latch opening. He punched a hole in the door. I know you guys just keep looking. You've never punched anything, hit anything, my wife and I've never been physical with my wife, but she has a few times with me. I just seen if you laugh. No, she hasn't. She's precious. But he punches a hole through the door. He's so mad. He goes, I tried to sweet talk you. I wanted to come back in. But you were like, no, you're going to make me get up. I've already got undressed. I got to put my shoes back on, blah, blah, blah. He's like, punches a hole through the door. And he bolts. Well, when he hits the door, watch what she says. He punched his hand through the latch opening. My heart began to pound. How many of you know? She goes, uh-oh, I have pushed this thing over the line. I've gone too far. Uh-oh. So she says her heart starts to pound. Watch what she does. I arose to open for my beloved. My hand dripped with myrrh, my fingers with flowing myrrh, and on the handles of the boat. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had left. He was gone. My heart sank for his departure. Oh, man, I missed it. I made him mad. He left. I looked for him, but I didn't find him. I called for him, but he didn't answer. I picked up my phone. I sent him a text. He didn't respond. I made a phone call. He didn't answer. He was not there. She pushed it too far. None of you have ever done that, have you? Let me talk about my relationship just a little bit. Pastor Laura and I we've been, by the way, this June will be 30 years of marriage for us. We have gone through the same types of conflicts that many of you have gone through in our relationship. And I remember those first 5 years, and it was maybe a little bit tougher in us, but although several of you have gone through the same type of stuff, we had a blended family because I got married at 19 years old, right out of high school. I was just out of high school, not even a year. I was married. And after 5 years of marriage, my wife left. And now let me fast forward to where we are today. We have a great relationship. We're all one big family because of how awesome Pastor Laura is. And I'll tell you more about that another day. But I had gone through that, and we had 2 little girls from the first marriage. So she comes into the relationship. Now she has a blended family. I love her to pieces because of some of the things that I'm going to share with you today. But now we have children, and all of a sudden we're married. And the word honeymoon means sweet month. When you get a new job, when you get a new boss, when you get a new husband or a new wife, you have a honeymoon, about a sweet month. And then all of a sudden you have some conflict. Because you're married to an imperfect person and the world is imperfect, the world is fallen, and we have conflict in the world, everybody. And what happens is we realize there's conflict. You have a different opinion. I have this opinion. You have that opinion. I think this way. You think that way. Who's right? Who's wrong? How many of you know I'm right? I mean, that's what we all think, right? I'm right. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be arguing this if I didn't think I was right. And so we begin to experience unmet expectations. Well, I thought the marriage was going to be this way. Christmas time comes and she says, when are you going to put the lights on the house? And I'm like, I don't put lights on houses. She says, oh, yes, you do. Today we have lights on our house every Christmas. How many of you know I'm a good learner? Yeah, she's a good teacher. I have lights, but she had an unmet expectation. She expected me to do some things that I didn't expect to do. We have self-centeredness, and I didn't want to do those things because it's about me, and I don't want to work that hard. I've got a lot of stuff to do. Are you with me? When you use words, the other thing we're going to talk about today is communication. When you use words like always and never, it creates a lot of problems. So we had to learn that one because we had a tendency to use those. And then we had to move on and learn this principle, and that is how to act and not react. Because what happens to us, and this is going to get really good, this is the practical part of the message. If we learn how to act right instead of react, reaction comes from a situation that happens. And when a situation happens, if you have not prepared ahead of time and decided ahead of time how you act, trouble ends up going to a whole new level. This will save your marriage. It'll save your relationships with neighbors, friendships, employees, employers. Listen to this. You have to decide ahead your parameters of how you act in the circumstances. So if I'm going to give you a few of those, I'm not going to allow, Romans chapter 12, verse 21 says, I'm not going to allow evil to overcome me, but I'm going to overcome evil with good. So what we do is create boundaries. So because I had already been through a divorce and it was horrible and I never wanted to go through that again. I don't want to go through it again. If you've ever been through that, you don't want to go through it again, right? It's painful. It's hard. Nobody ever gets married and says, well, if I can go through a divorce or two in my life, I'll get better. No, you want it to work, don't you? Everybody do this. Yeah, you want it to work. And so other of you, you've been through this. You have to decide ahead of time how you're going to do. Now, you can learn from the mistake, but I told you last week the ground rules for this. The ground rules are we're not going to listen through, I hope she gets it, I hope he gets it. The second ground rule was the past is the past. So some of the things I'm going to mention to you today, you've made mistakes in this area, and so have I. We're going to let that be the past, but we are going to learn from it, but we're not going to beat ourselves up or our spouse up for it. So whenever I first started dating Laura, she didn't have children. I did. I had two. She hadn't been married. I had. But one thing we did is we decided that we would create boundaries. We would say, and we said this, I wouldn't date her. I really wouldn't. I didn't. I made sure we dealt with this pretty early in our relationship if she didn't agree to this ground rule. And that is that if we get together and we do end up getting married, which we did, right? That you would never bring up the word divorce or talk about divorcing or talk about separation. That if we get married, we are committing all in on this relationship. We made that decision. We committed to that. And I told you this June will be 30 years of marriage. We have stuck with that. Never once has she said, maybe we just ought to go our separate ways. Never one time. Never. Never once. And I've never done that with her. Have we had some disagreements that had we not had that ground rule? Let me just tell you, yes, we probably would have, because there were times where it was so intense and so strong, the disagreement and the different opinions that we had, that we might have at that time, had we not preset the ground rules, we might have at that time talked about it. See, this is the importance of, in the beginning, making a decision how you're going to act in the middle of a situation. We made a decision that we would not let the sun go down on our anger in a situation. In those first 5 years, there were many times where we stayed up way past our bedtime dealing with an issue to get the issue behind us so that we could go to bed and not deal with it. You know what happens when you don't deal with an issue? What happens with us when we don't deal with an issue is we go to bed and it just kind of goes away, but it festers for a little while. Maybe for a day or two, maybe for 6 months or so, and then you come full circle and now you're dealing with the same issue again and you didn't deal with it. And when you don't deal with it the first time, it gets worse. It gets worse. So it was a payoff for us to miss some sleep in those early days. It was hard. It was difficult to miss that, but we did make a commitment to that. The second one is cap time. When I say cap time, this goes back to the difference between men and women. My brain and my soul, my emotions, this is me, and a lot of men are like me in this area. I have this limit. I can only go at it in an argument mentally for a short period of time before my cup is full. Can I get a witness in the house? And so thankfully, Pastor Laura, I've told her, I said in those early years, I said, if you will, when I call time out, if you will give me a break mentally, I'll come back to you in a few minutes. But you gotta hook me up with a break here. I can't keep your pace mentally and emotionally. She could go a lot longer than I could. And she could keep that talk and talk it all the way through. Whether it took 3 hours or 10 hours, she could go all the way through it in one shot. I have a limit of about 10 minutes, and I say, okay, I need a break. You got to give me a break. I'll go away. But she asked me for something. She said, yes, if I give you a break, you have to commit to me. This is good. This is good. She said, you have to commit to me that you will come back and talk about it again. And so I would go and I would clear my head and I would start to think right. I would let my emotions chill down. And then I would go, I don't want to go back into the tornado. Oh, Jesus, I don't want to go back into the tornado. But I committed to do it. So here we go. And we go back in. And let me tell you, it brought her peace. I discovered that when she gave me a break, it also, really, the truth was, it gave her a little bit of a break. And the fact that I was coming back to talk about it, it blessed her. And we've learned over the years that when I say, you know what, I can't talk right now, I'm emotionally, my battery is drained, I'm spent, she respects that. And and there are times when she says the same thing to me. Here's the other boundary that you really need to set. And that is a boundary on your words. Because in times of passion, in times of heated emotion, this is not only with you and your wife or your husband, this is also with you and your children. It's with you and your neighbors. It's with any relationship. And that is that we control our words. We made a commitment in those early years at the very beginning that we will never call each other names. See, because what we argue about, who you are, no matter who you are, what you're arguing about typically is an issue or a situation. Am I right about that? A situation happened. An issue is taking place. An opinion about a situation. And when we do what they did in the video, what Adam and Eve did in this video is they start to call each other names. You start belittling and you start looking at each other and talking through the filter and through the eyes of disdain. And let me tell you, one of the most predictable telltale signs of someone going to go through a divorce is how they talk to each other. And when you talk to one another, if you look with eyes of disdain and you make comments of disdain and you begin to name call, you are just like your mother. You are just like your daddy. You are just like the devil. When you begin to do that, you begin to undermine, because here's what happens. In the Google mind of the hearer, you just told them that the issue or the situation that you were arguing about is really not the deal. It's them. So you took the issue and you turned it into the person. And when you turn it into the person, now they feel rejection at a whole new level. And let me just say this. I say this quite often. In fact, this is filtered into our mission statement as a church. We as a church, we exist to lead people to experience and enjoy the unconditional love of Christ and to help them reach their full potential in him. But the unconditional part is the part I'm talking about. Every single human being you ever will lay eyes on, the greatest soul need in their heart is to be loved unconditionally. And Christ loved us while we were still sinners. He didn't say, you're cleaning up a little bit. I'm going to start loving you once you get a couple more things right. He didn't do that. He unconditionally loves you. It's the grace of God. The grace of God is the unconditional, unmerited favor of God that draws us to repentance. It means we were going this way, and his unconditional love loved us, caused us to change directions, and now we're going this way. We made our minds up we would never use derogatory words or cutting words to cut one another down. Now, if you've done that, the past is the past. You've got a choice today. You can change that. Don't do that anymore. Make a commitment to that. But don't make a commitment to it in the middle of the heated argument. Make a commitment on date night when you're sitting over a good filet mignon. You look across the table at her twinkling eyes and his sweet lips, and you say, you know what? I am going to love you unconditionally. And when we have an issue, the issue is going to be the issue. I won't make it about you. I won't use words that degrade you or name calling. I'm not going to do that. Come on, somebody. Coming to church today was worth the price of admission today. I'm telling you, it'll change your life when you begin to do this. So the second point on your outline is the choice. You've got a choice to make. Nobody's going to make you follow God, and nobody's going to make you be a good husband, and nobody's going to make you be a great wife or a great dad or a great mom. You've got to make a choice. You've got to make a decision. Let me just share this with you. Every argument, every point of conflict, it doesn't matter what it is, where it is, every point has an opportunity for you to make the right choice. And by the way, spiritual warfare is happening at every conflict. In other words, what is spiritual warfare? It's when the enemy is trying to get you to do something that will destroy. By the way, conflict, I just said this about conflict. There's not a whole lot, it's a short little amount. There's not a whole lot of good that can come from conflict. There is a little if you navigate it right and if you make some good decisions. Yes, it can get better. But let me say this. I've been a pastor for a long time. I grew up in a pastor's home. Let me say this. When conflict is happening, whether it's in a marriage or in a church or with two people, there's not much advantage there in the conflict. But there is a whole lot of opportunity for destruction. I mean, there's a whole lot of opportunity. Because what can happen in the middle of a conflict is you can say some things. You built a relationship for 10 years, and with your words, the words of your mouth, you can tear down that other person with an attack that destroys 10 or 15 years of good relationship. Watch your words. Control your words with your choice. Make a decision. So the spiritual warfare is the enemy's going, always. They always do this. They never do this. And if you buy into those things, and here's what causes us, here's the two adverse situations. We all have our pride. There wouldn't be a conflict if I didn't think I was right? I mean, we're in the middle of a conflict, and everybody knows I'm right. And your spouse or your friend, I'm right. Otherwise, we wouldn't be arguing our point of view. What is that? Pride. See, it's my own pride because I'm right and I know I'm right, and I got to stick with my position. And somehow in our mind, because we feel right, otherwise we wouldn't be arguing it, somehow in our mind, we stick with it. It's called pride. But the Bible has a way, it's a higher way, but it doesn't feel right because it feels like if I take that posture, I lose this argument. And the posture I'm talking about is the word humility. Oh, this is big because this will change your life. Never, ever learn this principle. This is a good one for any relationship. Never, ever wait on the other person to be the humble one. Sometimes we have this mindset when they apologize, when they admit that they're wrong, when they finally come to us and say, see, it's a choice of our will. And the sign of a very mature person is the ability to come back and be the humble one. What is humility? Here's the definition of it. And it will surprise you what I'm defining it as today. And that is, I'm going to focus on the good in this situation instead of the bad. Do you know that's humility? That's a mature person. When you can look at a situation, you can look at the conflict, and instead of focusing on what's bad about it, because how many of you know there's a lot of bad in it when we disagree? But if I can look at this situation, I can preach this message with such passion because I've matured through this. And what I begin to do is begin to look at what's right and what's good. Now I put my focus, because your mind goes where your focus goes. And when you focus on what's good, there's these 10 things, there's these 50 things that are wrong, but I'm going to focus on these 10 things. I will mentally give attention to those. See, this is why this is so important. But this really goes back to when we predefined these things. We did that here at Enjoy Church. Do you know that we keep a lot of peace in the house because of our 5 values? We were, several of us went to a pastor's conference this week, and I had the privilege of getting to speak a few different times to a lot of pastors. And I talked about this culture here at Enjoy Church. One of the things I talked about, and they were really intrigued with this, is how do you keep unity? Well, how we've done that here, and we could do it in our marriages too, is to identify what we value most. The mistake a lot of times we make at our businesses, our jobs, or even in our families is we can sit down and have an interview with someone and say the most important thing is God, the most important thing is family, the most important thing. But what we need to take time to do is to really take time. What do I value most? I'm not talking about some cute thing we're going to put up on the wall, but what really are we going to live and die by? What are we willing to separate over? What are we willing to come together for? Let me just share this with you. When we look at people around the church that we're going to promote to a department head, or we're going to ask to speak on this platform, or they're going to lead something, what we look at their life, this is the key, what we look at is how are they doing in the 5 values of the church. They may have all the talent in the world, but let me tell you, if they aren't saying, spraying, wheeling, and dealing the 5 values of the church, baby, they got a little bit longer to simmer on the stove. Why? Because your values will make you, or they will break you. By the way, you have values. It's just maybe, have you identified them or not? So, as I was speaking to the pastors, they asked me what the values were, and during the Q&A time, and I said, love is number 1, because God said, love God, love people, that's number 1. Number 2 is unity. This is just my point of it. Now I said, I personally would have put unity number 1, but God said we have to love. So unity's number 2. Let me just tell you, being in unity, my wife and I, to this day, we don't agree on everything. But one thing we are is we are unified. We are unified in the vision. We are unified in the direction. We have different opinions about a lot of things. She likes that song, I like this song. She likes that style, I like this style. But guess what? Doesn't matter. We're unified. We're not going to separate over those issues, right? Someday we'll talk about, is there ever a time to separate? Yeah, there is. It's rare, but there is a time. That's a different message. What I'm talking about today is bringing together unity. So what we can do is let the conflict be healed and focus intentionally on the healing part of it. Now, at this point that I'm going to read to you about Song of Solomon is verse 10, chapter 5. She's going to talk, and then he's going to talk in the next paragraph. This is her talking. This is the makeup. By the way, I guess one of the good things that can come from an argument is I remember when my wife and I first humbled ourselves, and by the way, it was her that humbled herself first. She came back and said, you know what, I'm really sorry, blah, blah, blah. Then she came back. Let me just tell you, the relationship on that argument turned pretty physical in a really good way, if you know what I'm talking about, in a positive way. And I'm like, well, man, that argument was worth all of this. Oh, we're going to fight some more tomorrow, baby. If this is the result of that, right? Here's the good news, that when you have people and their hearts are right and you humble yourself, you can turn things around. And the value, you know the value of my marriage today with Pastor Laura? You know the value of it? She could have bolted. She could have said, you are too hard-headed. But she stayed when she could have left. It's that way with us. There's always opportunities, there's always offense, there's always situations that happen in life, and we could leave. But when you stick and you stay, the value of the relationship goes up. She says, my beloved is radiant, ruddy, outstanding among 10,000. She's appealing to his ego big time. His head is like the purest gold. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves by the water stream, washed in milk, mounted like jewels. His cheeks are like beds of spice, yielding perfume. His lips are like lilies dripping with myrrh. How many know she does a really good job complimenting him and bragging on him? Are you with me? She's like buttering him up. Watch his response to her. He needs a little work, but he tried. We got to give him effort for trying. Watch. You are as beautiful as Tiraz. You, my darling, are as lovely as Jerusalem and majestic as the troops with banners. Turn your eyes from me. They overwhelm me. That part was pretty good. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from Gilead. I'm telling you, he just needs a little bit of help. Watch this part. It gets worse. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep coming up from the washing. Each one has its twin. Not one of them is missing. In other words, girl, you got all your teeth. You're beautiful. I like it that you're not missing any. And by the way, they look good. They're sparkly today. I mean, he needs to go back to school a little bit. But he tried hard. She gave him credit for trying hard. Let me tell you this, and then we'll wrap it up after the third one. My dad taught me these series right here that I'm getting ready to share with you. My dad was an incredible marriage teacher, communicator. Him and my mom had a long marriage, and he, being a pastor, taught on marriage quite often. Here's what he taught me. He said, Daren, one of the ways and the best ways you can navigate conflict is to listen with intention. In other words, listen for what's being meant, not just what's being said. How many of you know there are times in life where what we said isn't what we meant? Have you ever done that in a conversation? I know I said that, but later when you heard it back, it wasn't what you meant. I meant this. Oh, but you said this. Yeah, I did, but it wasn't what I meant. When you listen to someone you work with, someone you're married to, listen with intention. Listen for their heart. Watch their body language. Watch their posture. Watch them. Milk every drop of it. Number 2, seek to understand them. This is very difficult when you're in an argument with someone because you know you're right. You're arguing your point. You're arguing your posture from this thing. But when you seek to understand, what you're literally doing is you're getting out of your shoes and getting in their shoes and experiencing what they're experiencing with intention. Now, you may be right and you may know you're right, but pride says, don't get in their shoes. The goal is not that. It's not rightness. The goal is understanding. This is called maturity. This is maturity 404. This is when you have the maturity to not have to prove you're right. By the way, you can't change another human being, and you can't even change their mind. If you have any hope of reaching them or changing them, your only hope is to understand them. Get in their shoes for a minute. See what they're seeing. Listen for them. It may be wrong and they may be totally skewed, but by you understanding where they come from, not trying to change them, you now have a doorway, because you understand them, to now minister to them. Come on, somebody. I'm preaching. This is good right now. If you can understand them, and here's the way to let them know. Verbally validate them. In other words, ask this question. Okay, so am I hearing you say, and do you feel this way? The sexiest words you can say to a woman, the sexiest words is, okay, then what did you feel then? And what did you say next? What happened next? Why? Why is that so sexy? Because you're understanding them. She just wants you to hear her and try to understand her. She may know she's wrong, but she wants you to understand her. Ladies, it's the same way with you. And if you can verbally repeat back, okay, I think you're saying this, I think you're feeling this, I think you mean this, it gives them an opportunity to say, well, no, not quite that, but this. Now what's happening? Hey, everybody, two-way communication is now happening. You talk about the makeup and the restoration. It's going to flow. Young people that are married, you just got married, you're getting married, you focus on these 3 points right here, and the fourth one is this, and that is resolve to empathize with them. Don't ask a wounded person what they're feeling. Instead, become the wounded person with them. When you do that, let me feel that. I validate it by trying to repeat to you. And I'm in your shoes for a minute. Man, you were hurt over this, weren't you? Instead of trying to change him, let me feel what that feels like. To go through that pain, to go through that hurt. Let me just tell you, you can't ever break up that type of relationship. They're with you for life. When you live that way, that's called friendship for life right there. So the reconciliation. Paul said in Ephesians, get rid of all bitterness. You've got to do that. Get rid of all the passion and the anger. You got to do that. No more shouting, no more insults, no more hateful feelings. Instead, be kind and tenderhearted to one another. Forgive one another as God has forgiven you. Let me close with this last verse. Chapter 6, verse 11. She says, I went down to the grove nut trees to look for any new growth in the valley, to see if the vines had budded or the pomegranates were in bloom. Before I realized it, my desire set me among the royal chariots of my people. I thought about that, and I read that. When I first read it, I took it practically, but theologians tell us that in this situation, she's not talking about the literal valley. She's talking about the relationship. Is there still hope for this relationship? Is there growth in this relationship? We've gone through some stuff. But is there a potential and is there a possibility that things are going to get better? And she says, yeah. After looking at this relationship, I realized it. My desire was set among the royal chariots. In other words, this thing's going to get good, fellas. How does that work? Well, the theologians tell us what she did is she forgave. And he forgave. And when you forgive, most people think forgiveness is an apology. Sorry about that. And if you apologize, I'll forgive you. No. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is when you personally make a choice to let go of the offense and to let go of the hurt. And what she did was forgive. A good marriage is the union of two good forgivers. That's from Ruth Bell Graham, Billy Graham's wife. A good marriage, if you want a good relationship, but I say this crosses over into all relationships, happens when you're willing to forgive. Amen. Let me pray. Let me pray for you. Everybody in the room, everybody online, everybody on Facebook, you're all in relationships. And no doubt you've gone through conflict, and possibly some of you may be in conflict right now. Some minor conflict on one end of the scale. You had a little argument about something. On the other end of the scale, it could be that there's been an infidelity or mistrust, or she did it again, he did it again. But I have good news for you. No marriage is too far gone. Without God's word, God can heal a situation. I want to speak life over your relationships, and I do speak life over them. Let me pray for you. Father, for every relationship represented in the room, fathers, sons and daughters, mothers, sons and daughters, husbands, wives, employees, employers, neighbors, co-workers, friends, family members. Father, I lift all relationships represented online and Facebook and in this room. I lift them up to you, and I ask you to bring healing. May we decide ahead of time how we're going to handle and navigate those conflict situations in our life. May we be humbling ourselves and being mature, not having to have our way. I say this, I declare this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.